I want to start today with a concept that, honestly, it feels a little bit ungrateful. It's a phrase that, the moment you hear it, it just clicks, but it also makes you kind of squirm in your seat.
I think I know exactly where you're going with this. It's the comfort trap.
Exactly. The phrase is, good is the enemy of great.
It's a killer opening line, and it's the central thesis of the massive bestseller we are unpacking today, Good to Great by Jim Collins.
It's so counterintuitive, right? We usually think that bad is the enemy of great. If something is broken, you fix it to make it great. But Collins argues the complete opposite. He says we don't have very many truly great schools or great governments or great companies precisely because we have so many good ones.
And it makes total sense when you peel it back a layer. When things are just good, the bills are paid, the lights stay on, everyone is relatively comfortable.
There's no urgency.
There is zero incentive to do the excruciating work required to become exceptional. Good is. It's like a sedative. It lulls you into thinking you've already arrived.
That is such a scary thought, the idea that competence is actually a ceiling. And look, we aren't just here to talk business philosophy. The goal of this deep dive is to find the physics of this. If we refuse to settle for good, is there actually a roadmap to great? Or is it just, luck?
That's the big question. And I love the origin story of this book because it didn't start with Collins trying to be some guru. It started with him getting kind of roasted at a dinner party.
Yeah, this is great. So it's 1996. Collins is having dinner with Bill Meehan, a big shot managing director at McKinsey & Company. Now, you have to remember, Collins is already really successful at this point. He had written Built to Last, which was a huge hit about these visionary companies like Disney and Walmart.
Right. So he's probably feeling pretty good about himself.
Yeah.
And Meehan just leans over and basically pops the balloon. He says something like, Jim, we love Built to Last. You guys did a great job. Unfortunately, it's useless.
Useless. I mean, imagine hearing that about your life's work over appetizers.
It's harsh, but Meehan's critique was surgically accurate. He said, the companies you wrote about were always great. They had these famous founders. They had greatness in their DNA from the moment they opened their doors. They were, born on third base.
And most of us, well, we aren't born on third base. Most of us are working in organizations that are just, okay, we're just slogging through the mud.
Exactly. Meehan said, the real question, the one that actually matters to the vast majority of people is, can a good company become a great company? And if so, how?
So that became the mission. We aren't looking at the child prodigies of the corporate world. We are looking for the late bloomers, the ones that were, average, forgettable, maybe even a little mediocre, and then bam, something changed. We are hunting for the timeless physics of that transition.
And I really want to emphasize that word physics.
Yeah.
We aren't looking for fads here. We aren't looking for the business equivalent of some crash diet. We are looking for the immutable laws of organized human performance.
So how do you find physics in the messy world of business? I mean, you can't exactly run a controlled experiment in a lab. You have to look at history. And the research process behind this book, well, let's just say they called it a death march for a reason.
To really establish credibility here, we have to understand the scale. This wasn't a weekend of, Googling. This is a 5-year odyssey. Collins assembled a team of 21 researchers.
21 people, just crunching numbers for 5 years.
Collectively, they put in about 10.5 person-years of effort. They literally described it as a death march of financial analysis. They started with a massive list, basically every company that appeared on the Fortune 500 between 1965 and 1995. That's over 1,400 companies.
And then they had to filter them down, and the criteria they used were just incredibly strict.
They had to be. They needed to isolate the signal from the noise. First, the company had to show 15 years, a decade and a half, of cumulative stock returns at or below the general market.
Okay, so step 1, prove you are boring. Prove you're totally average.
Step 2, a distinct transition point, a clear moment in time where the whole trajectory changed. And step 3, for the next 15 years, they had to generate cumulative returns at least 3 times the general market.
3 times the market. That is a massive number to sustain for 15 years.
It's huge. And they picked that number specifically to rule out luck. I mean, you can get lucky for a year. You can have a hit product that carries you for 2 or 3 years. You cannot be lucky for 15 straight years. Just to give you a benchmark, the marquee set of famous companies, we're talking 3M, Boeing, Coca-Cola, GE, that group only beat the market by about 2.5 times during the same period.
Wow. So Collins was looking for companies that started out like, well, failures and ended up performing better than Coca-Cola and GE.
Precisely.
So, okay, they go through all that. The death march. They start with what, over 1,400 companies?
1435, yeah. A huge list.
And after 5 years of this, this incredible grind, how many are left? How many actually made the cut?
11.
Just 11.
That's it.
I mean, wow. That's basically a rounding error. It's statistically almost zero.
It's a tiny cohort. But that's what makes the data so powerful. These 11 companies were the true anomalies. And the final list averaged returns of 6.9 times the general market.
Nearly 7 times the market.
Let's put that in real money terms, because the book uses this comparison that it just blew my mind. Let's look at General Electric. At the end of the 20th century, GE was the gold standard, right? Jack Welch was the most famous CEO in the world. From 1985 to 2000, GE beat the market by 2.8 times. An incredible result.
Sure, anyone would take that in a heartbeat.
But if you had invested $1 in a mutual fund of these good-to-great companies back in 1965 and just held it until the year 2000, your $1 would have multiplied 471 times.
471 times.
Compare that to the general market, where your dollar would have grown to just $56. It is a completely different stratosphere of performance.
That is it's life-changing wealth. But here is the thing that really threw me when I first looked at the list of these 11 companies. I was expecting, I don't know, cool companies, early tech giants, media conglomerates, but this list is, well, it's dowdy.
Dowdy is the perfect word for it. It's unglamorous. You have Fannie Mae, you have Pitney Bowes. I mean, they make postage meters. You have Kroger, the grocery store. You have Walgreens.
Walgreens, the pharmacy on the corner.
Walgreens is actually my favorite example in the entire study. Think about it. For 40 years, Walgreens was just bumping along, completely average, just another drugstore. Then in 1975, the chart just goes vertical. From the end of 75 to 2000, Walgreens beat Intel.
Okay, pause on that. Walgreens, the place where I buy discount candy and shampoo, beat Intel, the company that basically built the modern computer age.
By nearly 2 times.
That just breaks my brain. We are so conditioned to believe that greatness equals high-tech or high-growth industry. We assume you have to be in, like, rockets or AI to put up those numbers.
And that is the first major lesson from the data. Greatness is not a function of circumstance. It's not about being in a glamorous industry. I mean, rocket nose cones aren't inherently better businesses than drugstores. Greatness, it turns out, is a matter of conscious choice. It's about what you do, not where you are.
So if it's a choice, what are the choices they made? Because the research team didn't just look at the winners. They did something very clever to isolate the variables. They used comparison companies.
Right. This is the scientific method 101. If you want to know what makes a company healthy, you can't just study healthy companies. You have to compare them to companies that had the exact same resources, the same market conditions, the same opportunities, but, well, they stayed sick. So for every Walgreens, they found a twin, a company in the same industry that failed to make that leap.
So they looked inside the black box. They read thousands of articles, thousands of pages of transcripts, just trying to find the difference between the twin that got fit and the twin that stayed on the couch.
And this brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of the whole analysis. They used the Sherlock Holmes principle.
The dog that did not bark.
Exactly. In the Holmes story, the clue wasn't what happened, it was what didn't happen. The dog didn't bark when the intruder came, which meant the dog knew the intruder. In this research, Collins found that the most significant findings were often the things they didn't find. The things that conventional wisdom screams are necessary for success, but, they just weren't there.
I love this part. Let's do some myth busting. Because frankly, modern business culture is built on a ton of these myths. We think we know what drives success, but the data really disagrees. So myth number 1, the celebrity CEO.
This is a huge one. We love the narrative of the white knight, right? The company is in trouble, so the board flies in some rock star CEO from the outside to save the day. They grace the magazine covers. They give the big speeches.
And it boosts the stock price on day one, just on the hype alone.
It does. But the data shows a negative correlation between celebrity leaders and going from good to great. 10 out of the 11 good to great CEOs came from inside the company. They were insiders who knew the culture, the mediocre comparison companies. They tried that white knight strategy 6 times more often.
So the answer is usually already in the building.
Honestly, that's pretty empowering. Okay, myth number 2, money. Executive compensation. Surely, if you pay people massive stock options and bonuses, they'll perform better.
No systematic pattern. None. They found absolutely no link between executive pay structure and the leap to greatness.
That just seems impossible. The whole industry is built on incentive alignment.
The insight here is really deep. Collins argues that you can't pay a mediocre person enough money to make them competent. And the right people, the ones who are going to build greatness, they'll do the right thing regardless of the bonus structure. Their drive comes from an internal moral code, not some external financial carrot.
Okay, myth number 3, strategy, that the great companies just have a better 5-year plan. Nope. Both the good companies and the great companies had well-defined strategies. The great companies did not spend more time on long-range planning. They didn't have better documents or anything like that.
Myth number 4, technology. We already kind of touched on this with Walgreens versus Intel, but let's drill down.
Technology is a trap.
Yeah.
The research shows that technology can accelerate a transformation that is already happening, but it cannot cause it. You can't just buy a computer system to fix a culture problem. The mediocre companies often panicked and adopted technology as a kind of silver bullet. The great companies were actually often slower to adopt new tech, but once they did, they applied it perfectly to their core concept.
Myth number 5, mergers and acquisitions. Growth by buying stuff.
The data is ruthless on this one. Two mediocrities joined together never make a great company. Mergers played virtually no role in igniting the transformation for any of them.
And finally, myth number 6, change management. We hear this all the time. We need to align the troops. We need to motivate the team.
The great companies paid almost no attention to motivating people. The argument is this: if you have the right people on the bus, they don't need to be motivated. They are self-motivated. If you have to spend all your time creating alignment and buy-in, you probably have the wrong people or the wrong conditions to begin with. In the great companies, the momentum itself solved the motivation problem.
So we've stripped away everything we thought we knew. No celebrity saviors, no magic paychecks, no tech silver bullets. So
Yeah.
what is left? I mean, how did they actually do it?
They moved from chaos to concept. The researchers visualized it as a process of build-up followed by breakthrough. And the metaphor they used, which has now become super famous, is the flywheel.
I love the flywheel image. It completely kills that overnight success fallacy.
It really does. Imagine a giant heavy metal disc. It's like 5,000 pounds mounted on an axle. Your job is to make it spin. So you push with all your might. It barely moves an inch. You push again. It turns once. You keep pushing.
And it feels like nothing is happening. You're just wasting all this energy.
Exactly. But you keep pushing. Turn 2, turn 4, turn 10. And slowly, the weight of the disc starts working for you. It builds momentum. Suddenly, it's spinning at 1,000 RPMs. If someone walks in right at that moment, they'd say, wow, what was the one big push that made it go so fast?
But there wasn't one push.
Right. It's the cumulative effect of disciplined action, over and over. That is the good to great transformation. It's not a miracle moment, it's momentum. And that momentum is built through 3 big stages: disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action.
Okay, let's unpack the people part first, because this leads us to what was probably the most shocking discovery of the entire research project, the type of leader required to get that flywheel started.
This was the finding Collins actually tried to avoid. He actually told his research team, look, ignore the executives. He didn't want to write another book glorifying leadership. He thought it was, a lazy answer.
It's the God of the gaps argument. We don't understand it, so maybe just say leadership.
Exactly. Yeah. But the researchers kept coming back to him. They said, Jim, we can't ignore it. The leaders of the great companies are all weirdly similar, and they are totally different from the leaders of the comparison companies.
Different how? Because when I think of a powerful CEO, I think of, General Patton. I think of Caesar. I think of a big ego commanding the room, the whole I am the state thing.
And that is exactly what the comparison companies had. They had the genius with 1,000 helpers model, but the good great leaders were different. They were more like Abraham Lincoln or Socrates.
Lincoln and Socrates, that is a very different vibe from Patton.
A completely different vibe. The researchers coined the term level 5 leader. So levels 1 through 4 are your typical, capable individual, team member, manager, effective leader. But level 5 is the absolute top of the pyramid. And it is defined by this incredible paradox: personal humility plus professional will.
Humility and will, that sounds like a contradiction. Usually if you're humble, people think you're soft. If you have a strong will, people think you're arrogant.
That's the magic. These leaders were often described as self-effacing, quiet, reserved, even shy. They didn't want to be on the cover of Fortune magazine. They weren't interested in being celebrities. But, and this is the absolute key, They possessed a ferocious, almost stoic resolve to do whatever was needed to make the company great.
And crucially, where did they channel their ambition? That seems to be the big difference.
That's the differentiator. Level 5 leaders channel their ego needs away from themselves and into the larger goal of building a great company. They want the company to be even more successful in the next generation, long after they are gone. The comparison leaders. The level 4s, they often set their successors up for failure, or the company tanked right after they left, because the whole company was built entirely on their personal genius.
I think we need to make this concrete. The book gives us this incredible case study of a guy named Darwin Smith, and I'll be honest, before reading this, I had never even heard his name.
And most people haven't.
Huh?
And that is exactly the point. Darwin Smith is the poster child for level 5 leadership. He was the CEO of Kimberly-Clark.
And let's just set the scene on who this guy was. He was not a charismatic salesman.
Not at all. He was an in-house lawyer, mild-mannered. He completely lacked that executive celebrity. He was a poor farm boy from Indiana. He worked the day shift at International Harvester and then went to class at night. There's this one story that really captures his grit. He lost part of a finger on the job one day.
Lost a finger.
Yeah. And the story goes that he went to his night class that very same evening and was back at work the next day. He was just stoic. He eventually went to Harvard Law, but he never lost that farm boy work ethic.
And when he became CEO of Kimberly-Clark in 1971, the company was, well, it was boring.
It was the dinosaur.
Yeah.
A stodgy old coated paper company. The stock had fallen 36% behind the market over the previous 20 years. The board wasn't even sure they made the right choice with Smith. A director literally pulled him aside and told him he wasn't qualified for the job.
Talk about a confidence booster on day one, and then tragedy strikes.
2 months after becoming CEO, Smith is diagnosed with nose and throat cancer. And the doctors told him he had less than a year to live.
Less than a year.
Most people would retire, go to the beach. Smith just informed the board he wasn't dead yet. He commuted weekly from Wisconsin to Houston for radiation therapy while running the company full-time, and he lived for 25 more years.
That is the professional will part of the equation right there. But let's talk about his style. He was asked by a journalist to describe his management style.
This is such a classic level 5 moment. He's wearing a cheap suit, probably bought at JCPenney. He stares at the journalist through these nerdy black-rimmed glasses. There's this long, awkward silence. And finally, he just says, eccentric.
Eccentric. I love that. He doesn't give some long lecture on synergy.
For fun, he spent his vacations on his farm in Wisconsin digging holes and moving rocks with a backhoe. He wasn't on a yacht in the Mediterranean.
So you have this quiet, rock-moving, cancer-surviving lawyer. What did he actually do with Kimberly-Clark? Because this is where the ferocious resolve really kicks in.
At the time, Kimberly-Clark's core business was paper mills, making coated paper for magazines. It was a mediocre business with just terrible economics. Smith looked at the brutal facts, which is another key concept in the book, and realized they could never be the best in the world at coated paper. But they had this little sideline business in consumer products,
Yeah.
Kleenex.
So he makes a decision.
He makes a decision that is just terrifying.
Yeah.
He decided to sell the mills, all of them. Even the mill in their hometown of Kimberly, Wisconsin, he basically burned the boats. He took all that money and threw it into the consumer business. Huggies and Kleenex to go head-to-head with Procter & Gamble.
Which is like a high school football team deciding to challenge the Super Bowl champions. P&G was a titan.
It was. Wall Street called it stupid. The media roasted him. The stock got downgraded. Everyone said it was an absolute disaster. But Smith never wavered. He applied that ferocious resolve. He knew that if they kept the mills, they would always be mediocre. To be great, they had to focus. And eventually, Kimberly-Clark not only survived, they dominated. They ended up owning Scott Paper outright. They beat P&G in 6 out of 8 product categories, and the stock returns 4.1 times the general market. Beat Coca-Cola and GE.
And Smith himself.
When he retired, he didn't brag. He simply said, "I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job."
That gives me chills. I never stopped trying to become qualified. That is level 5 in a nutshell.
It really is. It's that perfect blend of, I am not important, but the work is all important.
Let's look at one more example because I think it highlights a different aspect of this resolve. Corman Mockler at Gillette.
Coleman Mockler, another quiet, reserved man. People called him a patrician gentleman, always courteous. But in the 1980s, Gillette was under attack.
This was the era of the corporate raider.
Right. Hostile takeovers. You had guys like Ronald Perelman from Revlon. These guys were known as raiders. They wanted to buy Gillette, break it apart, sell off the pieces for a quick cash profit, and pay down their junk bonds. They didn't care about making great razors.
And the offer on the table was huge.
It was. They offered a price that would have given shareholders an instantaneous 44% gain on their stock.
So imagine you are Coleman Mockler, you are the CEO. If you say yes, the shareholders get rich quick. You personally pocket millions of dollars on your own stock. You get a golden parachute and walk away rich. If you say no, you have to fight a brutal proxy battle, call thousands of investors, and risk losing your job with nothing.
It is the ultimate test. Do you choose the easy money or do you choose the company? And Mockler chose to fight. He didn't capitulate. He and his team reached out to thousands of individual investors, phone call by phone call, to win the proxy votes and stop the takeover.
But why? I mean, was he just trying to save his job? That's what the critics would say. Entrenched management protecting their turf.
And that's the cynical view. But the reality was, Mockler knew something the raiders didn't. He knew what was in the R&D lab. He knew about the sensor and the Mach 3 razors. These were these secret, billion-dollar developments. He knew that the future value of the company was exponentially higher than what the raiders were offering for it.
He was protecting the future greatness.
Exactly. If he had sold out, we wouldn't have the sensor or the Mach 3. The company would have been gutted. And because he fought and because he won, the shareholders eventually reaped massive rewards. Far, far more than that 44% quick buck. The lesson here is that level 5 leaders aren't weak just because they are polite. They're absolutely fearless when it comes to defending the long-term greatness of the enterprise.
It's amazing. We so often mistake loudness for strength. And Mockler proves that quietness can be the strongest force in the room.
Absolutely. Strength isn't volume. Strength is discipline.
Now, I want to pivot to a question that I know our listeners are probably thinking right now. This study covered 1965 to 2000. That's pre-iPhone, pre-social media, largely pre-internet boom. Does this stuff still apply? Or is this just, a history lesson?
It's the new economy objection. And Collins actually faced this question right after he published the book. He was at a conference with a bunch of internet executives, and they asked him, don't we need to throw out all the old ideas? Everything moves so fast now. Collins gave a brilliant answer. He used an analogy. He said, engineering practices change constantly. We move from vacuum tubes to transistors to microchips. But the laws of physics, they remain valid.
I see where he's going.
Good to great isn't about business engineering. It's about the physics of organized human performance. The variables might change, the technology, the market speed, but the fundamental principles of how you get a group of people to achieve sustained excellence, those are immutable.
And he gives the example of Wells Fargo, right?
Yeah. Yes. In the early 1980s, the banking industry went through this massive deregulation. It was chaos. It was a new economy for banking, massive change, lightning speed. And Wells Fargo succeeded precisely because they applied these timeless principles. Level 5 leadership, disciplined people, confronting the brutal facts right in the middle of that storm.
So whether you are running a tech startup or a school, a church, or a government agency, the physics are the same.
That's the final point I really want to drive home. This book uses corporations as the data set because companies have clear scorecards, stock price. It's easy to measure. But the problem of good is the enemy of great is a human problem. It applies to your career, your marriage, your community.
If we can crack the code on good to great, we can apply it basically anywhere.
Exactly. Good schools can become great schools. Good newspapers can become great newspapers. It's about refusing to settle for competence.
So let's bring it all home. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the death march of research that proves this isn't just someone's opinion. We've looked inside the black box and realized that things like celebrity CEOs and massive executive bonuses don't create greatness. In fact, they might actually hinder it.
And we've looked at the solution, the flywheel, that buildup of disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. And at the very top of that pyramid, the level 5 leader, that paradox of humility and will.
The Darwin Smiths and Coleman Mocklers of the world, the ones who plow the backhoe and save the company not for the glory, but because they simply cannot stand to be mediocre.
That's the question I want to leave the listener with. If you look at your own organization or even your own leadership style, are you settling for good? Is good the thing holding you back from great? It's comfortable to be good, it's safe. But as we've seen today, it's a trap.
And I'll leave you with this one last thought, which I found really provocative in the readings. We have this tendency when things go wrong or when things go right to just kind of wave our hands and say leadership. It's become this catch-all word.
Right, like people in the 1500s saying God caused earthquakes because they didn't understand tectonic plates.
Exactly that. Why did the stock go up? Leadership. Why did the team fail? Leadership. But simply saying the word leadership stops us from thinking. It prevents us from looking under the hood at the specific mechanics, like that level 5 duality of humility and will that actually make the machine work. We need to stop looking for wizards and saviors and start looking for those quiet, disciplined mechanics of greatness.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The magic isn't in the wizard, it's in the work.
That's our deep dive on Good to Great. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.